The illiterate of the future are not those who can't read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. That's a quote by someone called Alvin Toffler, but never mind. Hello everyone, welcome back to yet another episode of the ThyGap podcast. This is me, Bogus Noog, and with me as always is...
Being Brute.
Brute, this week we're doing It's Not Easy, Unlearning.
It is a forgotten concept. It's an overlooked concept itself.
Majorly.
And the most important thing is it's an untaught concept.
Agreed on all counts. And as is our wont, Brute, every time we start with the colloquial definition of this word, we want to see exactly what is circulating popularly online.
Let's get everybody on the same page.
Yeah. So if I look up the word unlearning on Google, the definition that I find is to unlearn is to discard something that you've already learned.
Yeah.
That's the basic gist of the definition.
Yeah.
Now, we necessarily don't agree with that definition. Why?
I don't agree with it at all. Because we are human beings, are a very complex system.
Creatures, yeah.
Right? There is so much that goes on. I mean, if you go deeper, we are talking about conscious, subconscious, para-conscious, God knows what all. So anything that we have absorbed, it's very difficult to discard. It's not practical at all.
Yeah.
Right? So for us, I mean, we are on the same page with this because we had a very long discussion of 3 minutes. Unlearning is about learning how not to do it.
Yeah.
Or even simpler, how to hold back what you learned.
Right.
And that's as easy as we can put it.
Yeah. And the difference comes in the definition only mentioning the discarding of what you've already learned.
Yeah.
But that's not enough because if you look at basic hard drive storage, the way data is stored in hard drives, when you delete something on your computer, that information is not actually going anywhere.
Yeah.
Basically, your computer is making it invisible and available for rewriting.
Yeah.
So unless you actually store new information on those same sectors on your hard disk, that information is still as it is.
Yeah. It's always present.
So if you kind of upscale that example to how we function, if you're just thinking that unlearning is discarding what you already learned, but you don't override that with new information, with new learning, then when the moment comes, in the thick of it, your muscle memory is going to take over.
Yes.
And you're going to find yourself repeating the same mistake all over again.
Yep. I think that's very aptly put. Too technical for me, but I get what you say.
But like we always do, bro, why is it important to even unlearn something?
Let's say when we have learned something, we have to realize that we are in a constantly changing circumstance.
Yeah.
I mean, they do say history repeats itself, but
that's at a very macro scale.
Macro scale.
Yeah.
But even let us say that history repeats itself and say time is oscillating for us, that the same circumstances keep coming to us. For us to better our previous performance, we have to not do what we have done previously. And that goes from decision making, the actions you have taken, the reactions you have given, everything in the same picture, right?
Yeah.
So in the process of becoming better person in ourselves at any scale, we have to learn how to unlearn things. It's a paradox in itself. It's a very funny thing, which is why I feel this is it's a very complex, complex form of action. Concept, yeah.
To deal with.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for that word. I was searching for concept. Unlearning is a very complex concept because of this reason.
Yeah.
That it's paradoxical in nature, right? Like we have to learn to unlearn. Like unlearning leads to more learning. And what is happening?
Yeah,
what is the word that you use? Symptomatic. No. Simpatico. It's like a vicious circle.
Yeah.
Right? So that if we have to better ourselves, we have to learn or we have to unlearn our own self, right? So that we come out in new form, we make a better version of ourselves, etc., etc. And that's why it's really, really important. There is a lot of onus kept on, you have to keep learning.
Yeah.
You have to know more, right? But you should also know what you should not have or what you should not do.
What you should not continue doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, like you said, history repeating itself. We've observed cycles throughout our life.
Right.
From childhood to early adulthood, we grow up learning one set of information.
Yeah.
And then once we reach that adulthood, we figure out, there's so much of what I learned that's actually contradicting with reality.
Yeah.
So if a person does not course correct at that point of time.
Yeah.
If they don't readjust to the new information that's coming in, then pretty soon they're just going to be obsolete.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
They're going to be rigid in the ways that they grew up with.
Yeah.
And that's not going to do them any favors.
Yeah. And they'll be stuck in the past.
They'll always be stuck in the past. And
Right.
this is why it's really important to unlearn,
Right.
to know how to unlearn.
It's an important concept to be aware of also.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of people don't give it due importance.
Yeah. Like many of the things that we talk about on
Yeah.
this podcast.
Yes.
Subscribe and share.
Always.
But
Keep doing it in simpatico
Yeah.
method.
Yeah. But why is it not easy, bro?
Yeah, that's like the $1 million question.
Yeah.
Right.
What makes it challenging exactly?
So I'll dial it down a little.
Mm-hmm.
As a concept of unlearning, I think we keep doing it, but subconsciously.
Yeah.
And because we are doing it subconsciously, we never get to know the pattern of unlearning.
Yeah. It misses our attention.
It misses our attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now if we really have to, for any concept to be adopted consciously, you have to first identify it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Identify as to where this is needed. And that's the major challenge in the concept of unlearning. We don't know where to start. We don't know what we have to apply unlearning for. That's the biggest challenge, I feel. One of the major challenges of why it's not easy to unlearn something is the starting point itself as to what do I unlearn?
It's like, what do I identify
Yeah.
that I need to unlearn?
Yeah. Identifying that one puzzle or identifying that one trait or quality or whatever, you can give it any name tag.
So if we go one layer deeper, what makes it challenging to identify it in the first place?
Yeah, that's the second $1 million question. You want to go first or you want me to go?
Well, I think it requires identification, first of all, that something is going off, or I need to course correct what I already learned. I need to replace existing thought patterns with new ones. In itself, it requires certain amount of awareness, presence of mind in the moment. It requires the ability to, if not in the moment, then it requires an ability to analyze something that has already happened and actually reflect on what went wrong.
Yeah, constant introspection is one way to.
Introspection for sure. And it also requires, mindfulness. So basically I use synonyms, but pretty much, in the moment, mindfulness, presence of mind, awareness. But that's what I feel it requires.
Yeah, my take is a little different. It's beyond all this. Right? The problem with identifying what has to be unlearned, unfortunately, the most important things that we, in real time, in real life, the things that we have to unlearn are most often than not our strong forte, our strengths. And you can understand, you take an average guy of like, say, 30 years, 35 years.
Can I rephrase that to say the things that are more challenging to unlearn are the ones that usually become our strong forte? Because the ones that are not, maybe we can easily unlearn those. But the fact that something becomes our competence.
The ones which are not our strengths, we don't even have to unlearn. We are anyhow not doing it.
Okay.
You function on your strengths, right? I mean, if you go into a room and if they say like perform the best or do something that you're best at, you would do your strengths, right? Say if you're a storyteller is your strong point, you start telling a story. If telling a joke is your strength, you start telling a joke. But because it is your strength, you would not do that in a professional meeting.
Yeah.
And that's the concept of unlearning, right? So in major things in life, we rely on our strengths to pass through that tough times. And which is why it becomes, very tricky, because that might be the exact quality why it is not helping you succeed. Okay. For example, if you're like a headstrong person and it has taken you through a certain stage in your life because of that attitude of having a headstrong, approach.
Right.
But then there will come a stage where that approach might not work. But if you still continue to do it, it is only going to create more damage to you. It's like too sweet is also not good types.
Yeah,
right? So at that point, you have to like identify that, this is that attitude of mine, or this is the quality of mine, which is not helping me go forward. Now I have to sit back or like push this quality back and be more open-minded.
Yeah, true.
But it becomes very tricky because when you look at the data that you had on your journey, you will see that, hey, this is the quality that brought me up till here. So why is it that this will not take me further? If at all something will take me further, is this particular thing. So that is why I feel it's not easy to identify what you have to unlearn. because most often than not, it is masked as your strong forte or your strength.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you have to hold it back.
Yeah, that's what makes it really tricky.
Yeah, it's very tricky.
And another thing that I felt that becomes like a blocker to unlearn things is people usually tend to have this tendency of placing blame for something elsewhere. There's a general lack of personal responsibility or accountability or personal agency. When something goes wrong, usually it's a very, very few people who think, okay, all of that went wrong for me, but what was my role in that? And what could I have done differently? What could I have changed? Rather, they tend to place blame on, things just didn't work out my way. It's because this guy acted in this way. It's because my fate, So once we give up that responsibility completely to an external source, there's no scope for even thinking there is maybe something that I have to do differently, and which actually leads you down that road of unlearning.
Yeah.
So, I think that also could be another factor.
Absolutely.
But this, of course, is the phase that comes before.
It's half job done, basically. Once you identify, that's just half a job done.
Yeah.
What becomes even more challenging, right, in the concept of unlearning is the application part.
Yeah.
One of the points that you said in the beginning, that it's not just mental, it's also physical, it's muscle memory.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to, our muscles have a tendency to remember a lot of stuff that we forget.
Yeah.
So even after identifying what you have to unlearn or what you have to put in the back seat, because that has been your forte for so long, when the situation demands, you end up doing that.
Yeah.
So it takes an enormous amount of willpower or mental strength for you not to actually go forward and do it. Though the temptation is very high, though there is a huge urge or provocation, you have to go against all that and
there's a
sit tight.
Sense of comfort in just continuing to do it the way you always did it.
Exactly. It's like your backyard, right?
Yeah.
So that is another huge challenge in how do you execute or apply something that you've identified that you don't want to do anymore.
Yeah.
It's like quitting smoking, for example. Doesn't come under unlearning per se, but it's that difficult.
Yeah.
Any smokers in the room would know how difficult it is for you not to light up a cigarette and just sit tight even though people are smoking around you.
Yeah, to go against your habit,
Yeah.
which is well formed.
Exactly. And that's another huge thing. A lot of these things are our habits,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They fall in our daily routine. So for you to change that is a huge challenge.
Yeah.
Anybody who's trying to wake up early can identify, with this or will resonate with this. Anybody who's trying to have a timely meal, right? All these things are a part of unlearning. You have to unlearn how to not eat junk food.
Yeah.
And the process of unlearning not to eat junk food is learning to eat healthy.
Yeah.
So it's a very, like I said, it's a complex concept which is never broken down in a way where people can actually apply it for their own benefit. I've not found a lot of content on the concept of unlearning. I've actually tried seeing how many people have, put their finger on this point and said, hey, this is a really important thing.
Yeah, the max you can find are quotable quotes.
Yeah.
The one which we started this episode with.
Right.
But even I've not found anyone going into detail of saying, if you actually look behind the curtain, these are the things that actually are making it challenging for you.
Right.
So if you're aware of them, then maybe it'll make it a little bit easier
Right.
for you to actually, work your way through it.
Yeah. There's another point as to why it becomes very difficult to apply our unlearnings. If you look at it on a time scale, majority of the times that we have to unlearn something will come at a point where you're already matured mentally, where you're already have formed your beliefs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or you formed your habits, for example. Now, that is another huge challenge in applying what you have decided to unlearn. It's very difficult to go against your perception of the world or circumstances, right?
Yeah.
And the same point, like something which has been the reason for your success
Yeah.
can soon become the reason for your downfall.
Yeah.
And for you to let go that particular reason with a matured, rigid mind is a very challenging task. It's against your ego. It's against your conscious, understanding of things. So that's another reason why it's not easy to apply what you want to unlearn.
Yeah, exactly. Because in order to unlearn in the first place, you need to have an appetite for learning.
Yeah.
Because a lot of us grow up, at least in our society, we are grown up or we are groomed, with the mindset that, okay, you're in school now. focus on your 10th boards.
Yeah.
That's the big thing you have to crack. After that, life will be chill.
Yeah.
Then they'll say, okay, now you've crossed 10th now focus on your engineering
Yeah.
or focus on your higher studies. After that, you'll get a job and you'll be chill.
Yeah.
So we're always kind of working with the mental model that, okay, I'm going through the shit right now. I'm putting so much effort so that after a certain point of time, I get comfortable and I don't have to really do much after that. I can just work on autopilot.
Right. That's not the case.
That's not the case.
Yeah.
And the people who have a natural ability or affinity to continuous learning, they will find it more easier to unlearn something because they're actually open to new information coming in.
Yeah.
But the people who are not, they're never going to be open to new information coming in, which already closes the gates to any potential for unlearning.
Yeah. And also the fact that, in the pursuit of learning something, we are never taught or even there is no hint.
Yeah.
Or the fact that, this is all fine, but there will come a point that you should not use any of this.
Yeah.
You have to be choosy about, where you want to put all this. So at that point, you have to learn to hold back.
Yeah.
That's a concept which is not taught to anybody. And I think that is a very vital tool to have in your artillery, especially when you're growing up in your 20s or, in your teens. If you can somehow instill this particular concept that there will come a time where you have to hold back onto your forte because you got to develop something else. If that concept is incited at that growing stage, it is written on rock. So your brain, I think we have the ability to just pick that information when it is needed and utilize it. Because we are not aware that this is a possibility, we end up being headstrong or we just bludgeon into whatever problems we come with, whatever we think we have.
Yeah, and we've already recorded an episode on why acceptance is not easy.
Yeah.
And you were saying why to unlearn, it actually requires you to accept that what I have learned so far may not be correct, may not be right, and I need to be humble enough to change my ways.
Right.
There's also another element where courage also plays a factor,
Absolutely.
I feel. Because this is, again, a place where a lot of people turn away. When they come across information that is contradicting what they always thought, they don't want to go through the discomfort of facing up to the fact that they might have been fools for a while.
Yeah.
Or they might have been fooled by someone or something. Now they have to actually...
Misguided. I think the softer way is to put misguided.
Misguided, misled. And now they have to actually eat humble pie and learn the new thing all over again. And now correct their ways. So that's a really good point. You need to have an appetite to learn, first of all.
To unlearn something.
And that's the paradox
exactly.
you were talking about.
It's a paradox of for me, it's one of the best examples of paradox.
Yeah.
If I have to explain paradox, this is what I would probably put out there.
So we've talked about identification. We've talked about sense of personal responsibility. We've talked about application and why that's not easy.
Yep.
Are there any examples we could use to make it more relatable?
There's so many examples that come to my mind. And again, I'll take like a sports, example. This is an example of Sachin's, double century in Australia, right? And this was a time where he was not doing well. There was a big score pending for the longest time in that series. And he was getting out on, playing the cover drive or playing it outside the off stump.
Right.
And it actually came up recently also in Virat Kohli is also facing the same
South
problem.
Africa series.
Everybody was like, go speak to Sachin. The reason why this particular innings is probably the toughest battle fought by a sportsman was, Sachin was known for his cover drive shots, right? The cover shots, the back foot punch or the long strided cover drive.
It was his bread and butter.
It was bread and butter, right? Yeah. Anything in and around, even if it's a good ball, he knew how to convert that into a boundary. And that was not working for him for whatsoever reason. Like, let's not get into the reasons. What Sachin did in that innings took everybody by surprise. What he did was basically he decided that I will not play my strongest shot. I'll not play my favorite shot for as long as I'm out there in that particular innings. And he scored 241 runs without a single shot in the cover region.
Yeah.
And you have to understand why this is an extraordinary effort. Because it's not just a matter of making that decision. Of, okay, you know what, I'm not going to play a cover drive. But it is also going against your mental temptation, going against your body, your feet, your hands, your whole batting style, right? And now diverting all that attention or taking away all that temptation and converting it into playing on the onside or just playing straight.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, a person who played like more than 300 international matches, 500 international matches, test and one day or whatever format, for him to not play the shot that gave him the maximum result, it's practically inhuman if you ask me. But that guy pulled it off. Sachin pulled it off. And it's not that he forgot how to play.
He didn't discard it.
He didn't discard cover drive from his artillery. He just stopped playing it.
Yeah.
And that is the perfect example of how unlearning something that is your forte can actually help you in succeeding or, getting a better result of yourself.
And what made it especially more difficult was giving up all those things that you said that he had to give up. He had only microseconds to do that in. A bowler bowls in that channel, tempting him.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a lot of time to, adjust and course correct.
There's not elaborate decision making.
So you have to be he has to be consciously aware and present in each and every moment.
Yeah.
And every time a ball comes where he would usually play the cover drive, as he's done all his life,
right,
he has to now do something else.
Yeah, and it's not that in that innings he tried it a couple of times and he failed and he just didn't play.
Yeah.
That is extraordinary.
So almost like monk-like discipline.
Exactly.
That's required.
It's Buddha. It is that Buddha level of gameplay.
Yeah. Another example, contemporary example that I can think of is in the corporate world, as we unfortunately belong to.
Yeah.
You see individual contributors, they're very competent at their job.
Yeah.
And through that competence, they get promoted to, say, being a people manager.
Yeah.
And as soon as they cross that boundary, most of them continue working still as individual contributors.
Yeah.
Whatever their core competency was, whatever their strength was, they're always looking to step in and problem solve for their team on their behalf.
Right.
When there is no, stepping back and realizing that, okay, the nature of my role has changed now. I'm a people manager. I am responsible for how my team performs. So it's not about letting your team step in and allowing them to burn their hands and learn through example. Rather, you just want to step in every time and you want to problem solve yourself. Then how is your team going to grow if you keep doing that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a perfect example because being in sales, I see that more often than not because the best sales guy obviously becomes, the team lead or a manager. And the problem that I've seen is once you go into a room, right, for you to keep aside that seller's attitude is phenomenally difficult.
Yeah.
Because you see a win right up for the grabs out of your experience and out of your capabilities and skill set. But you're not in charge of the meeting. So a part of unlearning is also about giving that power to someone else.
Yeah.
I think if you're able to do that, it kind of makes your job easier said than done. But that's another huge challenge, right? You have to give the power of attorney to someone else who you don't have control on.
Yeah.
And as a manager, primarily you have to become an enabler.
Yeah.
It's not about result. Yes, it is about result, but it's about compounding result. It's not about one guy driving. The concept of leading by an example doesn't fit there.
Yeah, you're sitting there with your stakeholders and you know that there is some financial benefit to a pitch being sold exactly the way it needs to be. But at the same time, you need your employees to grow professionally as well and come into themselves. Now you're sitting there, you're hearing your underling pitch it in certain way where you know that you could have done it much better.
Yeah.
And you still have to sit there and hold your tongue.
Exactly.
Which is the challenging part, right?
Absolutely. For you to step out of that role. And it will benefit you also. Right? Because you will become a better manager. You get a better sense of what people actually need to become better.
Yeah.
And that comes with a lot of unlearning. That comes with, like I said, in this particular example, it's about giving the power of attorney to someone else and then giving them the confidence that they can deliver. And doing so, that is not easy.
Yeah.
Therefore, in like typical physics, how we do it, or like in proving a theorem, hence, unlearning, it's not easy.
It is not easy. Hey, thanks for listening. You can follow this podcast on Spotify to get notified of new episodes every Thursday. We're also on Apple Podcasts for those of you who have partaken in the forbidden fruit. If you liked what you heard, leave us a 5-star rating and a comment. Say anything like the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. A rating and a comment really helps us out. It's free, and I'm told that's a great price. But enough about us, huh? Tell us about yourself. Leave us a comment. Our Twitter is @ThyGap, and we are _ThyGap on Instagram.